welcome to Matt's Movie Reviews, and today I want to talk to you about my top 10 film facts. It's so hot, and where I film in the conservatory I can't see, so I've got my shades on just to be able to, so I can see the camera and talk to you guys, not just to try and look cool in front of you all. So anyway, at number 10, let's kick things off with Ridley Scott's seminal 1979 classic of Alien. Now, a lot of Alien was improvised in the process of the filmmaking, but the main shot that most people are familiar with and has been spoofed the most and is really iconic is the chestbuster scene with John Hurt. Now, this was filmed in one take. It was done with 4 cameras, and the crew and the cast had no idea that Ridley Scott had set up an explosion of blood so much to get their reaction out of it. And actually what you see is their genuine reaction to the blood splattering, and Veronica Cartwright in particular was so traumatised by the event that she actually passed out after the take. So at number 9 we have Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, Nicholas Meyer's film from 1982, which was the sequel to the Star Trek the motion picture, but kind of rebooted the whole Star Trek after that. Ricardo Montalban reprised his role of Khan from the 1960s episode The Space Seed, and it is probably the best Star Trek film. It came back with a bang. An amazing film, but one of the sad true facts about the film is that actually Khan and Kirk never interacted with each other. It was always done through the monitors of the view screen, and because of this, the actors never actually worked with each other. When they communicating through the screens, on the other side was a script girl and reading the lines to Ricardo, and vice versa with William Shatner.
This is Admiral Kirk. We tried it once your way, Khan. Are you game for a rematch? Khan, I'm laughing at the superior intellect.
Full impulse power.
No, sir. You have Genesis. You can have whatever you... Full power. There.
So they never ever got to interact with each other. But actually, when you watch the film, you would never know, because the actors do a great job of, portraying their roles, and you believe that they actually are speaking to each other. Although it is said that Nicholas Myers had to do so many multiple takes with William Shatner just to wear him down, just to get the right takes.
Buried alive. Buried alive.
At number 8 we have The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's film from 1980, starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall and Danny Lloyd. Now, many of you may know that the famous line, "Here's Johnny," was improvised by Nicholson, and it took about 7 or 8 different takes and 7 or 8 different doors to get that line. But today I want to talk about that Danny Lloyd, who played Danny in it, the young lad, didn't actually know that he was starring in a horror film. He actually thought he was in a drama, and the way that they cut it and filmed the scenes, he had no idea that he was starring in a horror film. In fact, he didn't know until 11 years later, when he was around about 19, that he got to see the film in its full form, which must have been quite a shock for him to know that he was in one of the most seminal horror films of its gender and generation.
Red rum, 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 red rum.
So at number 7 we have Sam Raimi's 2002 classic superhero film SpiderMan, which relaunched the whole superhero agenda after the dismal Batman and Robin back in 1997. Now, many of you may not know is that the final costume for the Goblin was very different to how he appeared in the comics. The original concept of the Green Goblin was he was a green skinned guy in purple boots and purple hood, etc. But they kind of went for a really sort of Power Rangers look for this. This was how they decided. And it was one of the few criticisms of the film was how the Goblin looked, and he was more like a Power Rangers villain. But it's sad to know that in production, pre-production, that they came up with an amazing mask for the Goblin, which was more in tune with the comics, but was deemed too scary for the film, which is ludicrous really, after you've seen things like Harry Potter, etc. This was obviously a very big disappointment because the final version could have been so much better. May have had something to do with William Dafoe, who played the Goblin, didn't want to just be behind a mask, I'm not too sure, although he did spend most of his time in one. You could see his eyes, you could see his mouth in the final version, and that's maybe why this wasn't so successful. But a big shame and a real great look if they'd gone with that. Okay, so next up we have Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis' classic from 1985. Now, everybody's a massive fan of Michael J. Fox and his portrayal of Marty McFly, but few may know that actually he wasn't first cast in the role. Eric Stoltz, famous for being in The Mask, not the Jim Carrey version, was originally cast and they started filming with him. Unfortunately, it was felt that his comedic timing wasn't as great, and Michael J. Fox had always been the original choice for the role, but was tied up filming this series Family Ties, which was huge in the United States.
Jane, can I ask you a personal question?
Go ahead.
Are you seeing anybody right now?
So Eric Stoltz unfortunately was fired, and Michael J. Fox was allowed to come and film in the evenings and at weekends as long as it didn't tie up with his Family Tie commitments. And so we may have got a very, very different version of Back to the Future. This is probably one of the biggest surprises for me, and it came out in recent years where you've got footage now, as you can see, of Eric Stoltz doing some of the iconic scenes from the movie. Could have been a very, very different Back to the Future. I wonder if it would have been as successful with him in the role. I can't say that he probably wouldn't, but it'd be very difficult to imagine anybody else playing Marty McFly these days. So let's move on. Next up we have Toy Story. Now, who can imagine Toy Story without Sheriff Woody? Well, it was nearly possible. It was revealed that Tom Hanks' character was very, very differently portrayed in the opening version of Toy Story. So in the development of Toy Story, the character was very, very different. In fact, he was not a little toy cowboy. He was in fact a cowboy ventriloquist dummy who had a very sadistic nature, and there's a clip coming up in a minute which you'll be able to see, and he was very, very different in character and in tone. So the character went through a huge development, and all the better for it, because again, when they go through these things, it's normally for the better. Who can imagine Toy Story without Tom Hanks' wonderful Woody?
Hi, pal, what you doing?
I'm Tempest from Mars.
Yeah, what's this button? Say, you weren't thinking of flying, were you?
Well,
You know, Andy loves toys that can fly.
really? Well then, to infinity and beyond.
You know, Andy loves toys that he can find.
Okay, next one, and this is one that I've touched base on my Flash Gordon review that I did at the Manchester Classic Films a few weeks ago, is that Flash Gordon's voice in the film was dubbed by another actor. Sam J. Jones flew off to the States after falling out with the producers of the movie and didn't return to finish his role. And now, there's certain different reports. Some say that the whole voice was dubbed, some say that there was elements of the voice. Nobody really knows, and it's one of the biggest mysteries in the film's history, is that nobody can remember or nobody knows who dubbed Flash's voice, and nobody can decide whether it was all or half of it. And I've been trying to start a campaign. It was hashtag Find Flash's Voice, I've tried to go through a few of the industries, people like Pinewood Studios, etc., Blind Blessed, to try and find out these facts, but I can't get any answers on it. So I'm going to put it out here again, hashtag Find Flash's Voice. Contact me on Twitter or Facebook or through YouTube here, as I really want to try and find this out for my next video, which I'm doing a retro review on Flash Gordon. Okay, so long time before the incredible success of the Avengers and Marvel's hold on the whole cinematic universe as it is these days, in 2003 Ang Lee released and directed Hulk, which was the very first film version of the Incredible Hulk that we got to see, and he gave it a very particular style. There was a lot of long lingering shots and this very sort of cartoony cut panel boxes around the screens, etc. Fair to say that Hulk wasn't a very big success. This led on to the Incredible Hulk being produced in 2007, which kind of had a little foothold in the Marvel universe, but wasn't very successful either, which led on to the Avengers version of the Hulk. But I want to talk about Ang Lee's Hulk, and now in that film it was the CGI Hulk, and he was produced by ILM. A lot of people weren't very happy with him. In certain scenes he looks like a frog. They felt that he was too green. But some of the action set pieces are amazing, but doesn't sort of mirror up with the rest of the film. So in pre-production they were considering using an animatronic version of the Hulk, and one was actually built and produced. It's fair to say that it would probably, I can't imagine how this would have been used in the big action set pieces, but it may have taken some of the problems away where some of the CGI didn't look great in some parts of the film. But it's really interesting when these films go through this big production process, and you know, these companies are tasked with building animatronics. It happened actually in the 1979 version of King Kong. So production houses and effects teams are tasked with coming up with solutions, and sometimes we never see the light of day. We would never know that originally the Hulk was going to be animatronic, and the pictures here are really, really interesting. I often wonder what happens to these things when they're not used, or they just get dismantled and used on other projects. So yeah, the Hulk was originally going to be animatronic. Would it have made the film any better? I doubt it, but it would have been really interesting to see that. So this was the first time that we got to see the Hulk since the 70s TV series starring Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby, and for many of us will always be the Hulk in our hearts. Okay, next up on the list we have Star Trek Generations. The second Star Trek on the list, no surprise there because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. But Star Trek originally was going to be the torch passing of the two TV shows at the time. There was only two then. The original series crew and the Next Generation crew, which were kind of wrapping up their series and becoming really popular. And it was deemed that the old crew were getting a little bit past it, and they'd already said their goodbyes in Star Trek VI. So a new film was devised to pass a torch between the two franchises and try and come up with a way with getting the crews together, even though there's 80 years difference between the timeline. A lot of script revisions were done, but it was deemed impossible to try and get every member of the crew to interact with each other without it just being one or two, you know, lines of dialogue, etc. So it was whittled down to three. The famous trio of Kirk, McCoy and Spock. Unfortunately, Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley both felt as if the script wasn't, were just more like cameos, and they didn't really want to take part. Funnily enough, both had appeared in the Next Generation TV series. DeForest Kelley in the pilot episode, and Spock, Mr. Nimoy, had appeared in Unification. So maybe they felt as if they'd done their piece, they'd done their time.
Captain, is there something wrong with your chair?
So the script was tweaked, and it allowed for Scotty and for Chekhov to take over the roles. Scotty took over the Spock segment, and Chekhov took over from Bones' lines. And actually, if you watch Generations again, you'll be able to see very, very clearly that they didn't really tweak the script that much, and those roles were for Spock and McCoy originally. A big shame because obviously it was never, filmed, and Generations was a massive disappointment for a lot of people, including myself, who, when I read about it originally, couldn't wait to see the two crews get together and imagined the film very, very differently.
Take us out.
Ready, good sir.
Not a tear to the eye. I'll be quiet.
So my biggest film fact is that Star Wars was saved in the edit. Now I'm going to put a link to a video up below if I can of something that will give you more information on this, because I can't cover it all in this video. So when Lucas showed the rough cut for the film to his friends Spielberg and fellow directors, it didn't look great. Star Wars was not in the best shape, and it fell to the editing team, who won Oscars, by the way, and his wife at the time, Marcia Lucas, saved Star Wars. Essentially, it was her idea to intercut the fact that the Death Star was on its way to destroy the Rebel base. This wasn't originally filmed, and it was done very cleverly with little cuts to little segues here and there to give you the feeling that they were under threat. Originally it was just a couple of trench runs, Luke misses, and then he goes back in again and then blows up the Death Star. This is what really saved the film, and it's a really interesting part of the filmmaking process.
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Okay, so that's the end of my list. Let me know if there's any film facts that you know, or if there's anything you'd like to see me do a little series of these videos. I'd like to try and sort of set some different things aside from just doing current reviews, my little retro reviews, and some little in-between videos, just to keep things moving on my channel. So if there's something you'd like to see me do in the future, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, give us a subscribe here on Matt's Movie Reviews. Give me some comments, I'd love to hear from you, and thanks for watching.